Welcome back to Worship Musician Training. This is part 6 in the series of stuff you should know, things that you need to know as a worship musician. And this part is all about growth and trying to answer the question of how do I know if I'm growing in all of the things that have been covered in this series so far, the stuff that I need to know. I've been teaching this series with the assumption that you are at least an intermediate level, a reasonably competent musician in your own right. You've been playing for maybe a couple years. You kind of know what you're doing to a certain extent, but you haven't learned scales and chords and the theory stuff, which is how I describe myself. That's exactly where I was a couple years ago. But what if you are a beginner and you are watching these videos, trying to get yourself up to speed, or you think you're not ready to join your worship band at your church? What if you're new to your instrument in general? Like I just started playing last week, and I don't know how to play my instrument yet. What if you're new to performing? Maybe you've performed for a little while, or you've been playing for a little while and you've never performed before on stage in front of an audience. What if you have never learned this music theory stuff, which is what I've been kind of assuming this whole time? Or what if you're just new to contemporary praise and worship music in general? And this is just a quick list of things that you can do. Just be excited about it because there's so much to learn, and that's what's fun about music in my perspective is the stuff that you can learn and the stuff that you can take from it and the stuff that will help you grow as an individual. Be excited about that. Take lessons. Take lessons from, you can, $100 a month probably get you a decent teacher. And I give lessons too in multiple instruments and singing and stuff. That's part of how I make my money. So take lessons from somebody that they can show you how to play your instrument if you're new to your instrument. They can point out the postural flaws that are inherent or natural to a beginning musician, especially. But they can also help solidify these things about chords and scales and things like that. Watch YouTube because it's free and everything is there. Enough said. Play a lot. Enough said. Learn the piano. This is a little bit of an extra thing, but I think it's really important because what is the piano? Well, the piano is the king of instruments in Western music. It is the most important instrument to come out of Western tradition, and everything is based on it. Our tuning system is largely based on serving the piano, and guitars and basses are built with that tuning system in mind. And singers sing in general with that tuning system in mind, although it's a little bit different for singers. Back to where the question, how do I know if I'm growing in my knowledge of my scales, in my knowledge of my chords, in my implementation of that knowledge through practicing and playing music in time? Number one, you'll know that you're growing if your ear training is increasing. Ear training is a broad topic, it's a broad term that covers what I've written in red right here, the ability to recognize intervals, which is the distance between notes. We measure in half steps. You can recognize intervals. You can recognize chords, which is groups of intervals. You can recognize keys, which is to say scales, and you can hear sol, you can hear do, you can hear mi, you can hear la. You know which note is which just by hearing it. You can recognize rhythms. You can tell if it's a simple or compound rhythm, or you can tell if it's a polyrhythm, or you can tell if it's a quarter note or a half note, and all that stuff. You can tell that by hearing. You can tell your time signatures by hearing. so on and so forth. You can tell all of this stuff just by listening to it. That's ear training. You'll start to notice that. You'll start to notice that, number two, because your ear training is increasing and getting stronger, that you start to learn songs a lot more quickly. And if you get to a really strong ear level, your ear is really strong and really sharp, and you can hear all of these things immediately. You can sit down for the first time hearing, especially a contemporary praise and worship song, where it's 1, 4, 5, 6, and it's predictable what it's going to be. You can sit down for the first time ever listening to a brand new song, and you can hear the first note. You can hear, okay, this is do. Now, what key is it in? You have to find that on your instrument. And that key tells you what chords you're going to play and what notes you're going to use. And you can immediately sit down and start playing along with that song that you've never heard before as you are listening to it for the first time. That's the power of ear training. It is super powerful. Of course, it takes a really long time, many years to develop that skill level. Not only the skill in ear training, but the skill in your instrument and the knowledge of scales and chords and chord progressions and rhythm and all of the stuff that we've been talking about. This is the culmination of what we've been talking about, this ear training thing. It's huge. Number three, you will be able to tell if you are growing if your worship presentation mindset changes when you're on stage, when you are on the platform, as Hillsong puts it. When you're on the platform and you are conducting worship, leading worship for a congregation, what were you thinking about before you started learning all this stuff? Try and think back to it. It might be hard to connect to that. It's pretty hard for me to connect back to that stuff right now. Back when the only chord that I knew how to play on the guitar was a power chord, that was all I could play. So what was I thinking? What was going on in my head while I was performing worship or conducting worship on Sunday morning or in rehearsal? What was I thinking about? I was thinking about where am I? I didn't really know my instrument very well. I didn't know where all the notes were, but I knew this one power chord shape, and that got me through it. So a lot of my brain power was focusing on trying to play my instrument and trying to not play wrong notes. When your mindset changes after you learn all this stuff and you grow, you start to learn how to play your instrument a lot better, and you develop muscle memory there. You know all this theory knowledge that combines together to this fluidity in your ability to play the music. And you're no longer thinking about, how am I playing this? What am I playing? At that point, you start to dig into the song, and you are listening to the song as you are playing it. You're not listening to your own part, or you're not trying to think about what's the next part of the song. Is it the chorus or another verse, or is it a bridge? What's coming next? You're not thinking about that anymore. You're just going. And your muscle memory takes care of that for you. So what you can think about is you can think about worship, and that is awesome. So if you start to notice that, then you have a pretty good indicator that you're growing. Greater knowledge and technique. If you're doing all this stuff, I can keep repeating myself over and over again, but this is what this is all about. It's all about building layer upon layer of thing after thing, of skill after skill. And if you are growing, then you will have more bandwidth as you're practicing, not as you're performing. Similar to your mindset change, your mindset as you're practicing changes, and you can focus on developing your technique. On the guitar, you can think more about, where's my thumb position. I can develop my alternate picking. I can develop my arpeggios. I can develop my my posture on any instrument. You can develop your posture a little bit better. And you start to think about those things as you practice. And through that, you get better technique and you become a better musician, um, because you're growing in your knowledge as well at the same time. All these things are becoming fluid. They are just coming out, and you're just worshiping on Sunday. And then Monday through Saturday, you're more or less just having a good time practicing. It's fun to practice, and you are developing yourself in an athletic way. Um, anyway, lastly, um, you might notice that your connection to the music through this fluidity, through this muscle memory, through this uh, greater, through this growth, your connection to the music as you grow becomes a conduit for the congregation. This is something that is pretty advanced, and you get to a pretty advanced stage, like Hillsong, or well, Hillsong is kind of the perfect example for this, actually. When Brooke is singing a song, Brooke Ligerthart, is that her name? When she's singing a song, you're not thinking about, as the listener, you're not thinking about her singing the song. It's like she is the song. Um, when you're watching any of those worship leaders, Taya, formerly Taya Smith, I can't remember what her married name is, but she's that kind of performer as well. Where when she is singing, she becomes the music. She's not staring at the back wall, at the confidence monitor back there because she can't remember the lyrics, or because she doesn't have the lyrics memorized. She knows her stuff as the leader, as the worship leader, as the lead singer. That stuff is is there, and she has ascended to this level, this skill level, this knowledge level, this performance level, to where, and insert your favorite performer here, but they've ascended to that level. They've built themselves. They've grown to that level where when you listen to them conduct worship, it's not distracting that they are performing, and you're not thinking about them being a performer. You're just listening and taking in the music, um, which is some serious stuff. It's like the difference between going and seeing a high school orchestra play versus going to the symphony. It's a huge difference, and that's not to be understated. That is a massive level of growth that takes decades, really, of work. I said it takes decades to get to that symphonic level of skill, of transparency in your performance. Literal decades, of doing it every single day, slowly, building your knowledge, building your muscle memory, building your technique, um, so on and so forth. It takes a long time, and don't be discouraged if you don't see this growth happening on day two, uh, or week two, or month two, as I think I said back in the way back in the horrible introduction to this series. Um, it might be that you don't look back to see if you've grown until a year later, and that a year later will be a huge difference for you. Which to say, don't constantly be checking yourself every single day. Am I growing? Am I growing? Am I growing? Chill out for a little while. Wait 6 months before you ask yourself that question again.